Kathy Jean Clement, the arts editor of Stranger. Founded in 2003, the Stranger Genius Awards has thus far conferred the title of Genius on 56 Seattle artists and arts organizations. These 56 geniuses each got a bag of no strings attached cash in the amount of $5,000. I'd like to humbly point out that this amounts to more than $250,000 shoved into the pockets of local artists by a newspaper in the years between 2003 and 2013. It is incredible, and the art staff of The Stranger is incredibly proud and happy to be a part of it. This summer we served up a fresh batch of 25 new Genius finalists. We're spending the next 5 Wednesdays looking into their minds and honoring them, and hopefully having a drink with them at Vito's afterward. You should all come to the after party. And the film nominees are whose ears we're looking into, between this evening. Thank you for coming, gentlemen. And thanks for all the previous Genius winners in the house. We're especially glad to have you too. A few other thank yous. Alaska Airlines Signature Visa returns as the film category sponsor for the 3rd year, so many thanks to them. Thanks also to the Space Needle, Amazon, and Microsoft Research Group. And thanks to the donors who have adopted the Genius Awards signature wine, Genius Juice, as their beverage of choice, turning booze into wine. Special thanks to our extremely gracious host, the Frye Art Museum. We're so delighted to be here. And I'd also like to especially thank Stranger publisher Tim Keck, whose commitment to the arts in Seattle is also just Annual Genius Awards are at the Moore Theater on October 18th. They are free to everyone this year. Save the date, tell your friends, come on down. And now to the Genius.
Hello, I'm David Schmader. With Charles Bidet, and I'll be doing our first 2 nominees. Our first nominee is Paul Ehorn. Oh my God, I just rehearsed with you and now I effed it up. Now I'm embarrassed to cuss because I broke your heart. Paul Ehorn. Okay. He is an actor. He has had a long, lovely career, but the past couple years has put his name in very high rotation because of a couple really big splashes at Sundance, and it's a delightful thing for our city because they were both movies that, well, there's 2012's This Is Martin Bonner, and then this year there is Land Ho, which opens this Friday at 7, so perfect timing for us and you. And these are films not only where that he starred in and they got great responses, but uniquely built around performances that he can give. Very exciting to have him here in Seattle. We're going to show you a bit of his work, and then I'll chat him up on stage. So please enjoy the moment.
This is our introductory pamphlet. Mind if I ask how much more time you have?
18 months and 6 days.
Perfect. Basically, the program works in 3 phases. The first phase is to develop personal thought processes and moral filters. The second phase, and this is important, tests those moral filters in real-life situations. So you could find yourself, working off-site in work programs. And any money you make gets put into a bank account, which is available to you when you're released.
You mean I get to earn money outside?
Yeah.
How much?
Well, that will depend on the type of work, I suppose. You know, minimum wage.
How much is minimum wage?
Well, Maryland, it's $7.15 an hour.
$7.15.
Could be a little less here.
Shit, that ain't bad.
Yeah, well, we can cross that bridge when we come to it. The third phase is re-entry into society, where you work with your mentor to make sure that you don't end up back here.
You ain't gotta worry about me ending up back in here.
No, I hope not.
Yeah, I paid my dues and then some in this motherfucker.
Yeah, well, some people find the transition a little more difficult than they expected.
What type of jobs they got for someone like me?
Truthfully, I don't know. You know, custodial maintenance.
Craft labor mostly? Factory stuff?
You new at this job?
Yeah, I'm new at this job.
What kind of job you had before?
I worked for a church.
Like a preacher?
No, like a business manager.
A business manager. I guess even church got to have business, huh?
Yeah, they do.
I've had a few of these too.
Hi.
Hi, David.
Let's talk about that scene we just watched because I feel that like that's the first scene of the film, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the first thing I saw you do, and
Demetrius, the other guy, Demetrius Gross, is like, he's really quiet when you meet him. He's like, hi, how you doing? And in this scene, he scared me. He was so, he was like, oh my God, this guy's gonna kill me any moment. Yeah, it was, when you're in that moment and you're playing with someone who gives you absolutely everything that you want, it was just amazing. He is the most amazing actor because it's the opposite of what he is, you know, personally, and that's kind of a good actor, I think. Yeah, it was a real experience. The whole film was an experience. Yeah.
yeah, if you haven't seen many of Paul's films, he is a master of great cinematic minimalism, of using what he's got. And the characters, there's something about the characters, you use everything you have. You don't bother creating what you don't need to create. And what I loved you telling me about this scene was, actually throughout Martin Bonner, it's a movie that certain reviewers have said, nothing happens. It's one of those kind of movies, but everything happens. And one thing that's wonderful about it is Martin working through roles of his life. Like his job requires him to be this one way, a certain type of actor. Phone call with his daughter requires him to act in a different way. And I love what you told me about the direction for this first scene of like the one note you got.
Yeah.
Tell them.
Yeah, Chad Hardigan is the director of the film, and as an actor, when someone escalates the discussion, as in Demetrius, your natural tendency is to go with it and say, okay, well, if he's going to get angry, then I'm going to go with it, and I'm going to fight him. And Chad Hardigan comes across to me, and he really is an amazing person as a director. He puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, Martin doesn't get angry. And that's the only direction that he gave me in the whole film. It's like, oh, okay. You know, and I try and teach the people that I talk to, the younger actors I talk to, is you know, don't go for the obvious. Just try something else. Oh, we were talking about this earlier. It was like the Seinfeld episode with Officer George. Right? He does everything the opposite. And I say to my people, try doing it, you know, instead of going deep into this wicked display of emotion, try doing something different. Try going the opposite of where you would go. I mean, your intuition as an actor is to go to certain directions, but the direction from Chad was that made the whole film. It made the whole film.
Well, it sounds simple to give you this one thing, but it requires you to fill in a million blanks of how he avoids anger through his entire life. I mean, it puts the onus on you, and you did it. Where did this appreciation for minimalism come from, and where did you cultivate the sense that this was clearly the way you wanted to go?
You're not going to believe this. Watching James Lipton on the Actors Studio. I mean, I've trained since I was 19, so, you know, it's not as if this is new to me, but, I mean, he interviews the greats, and, you know, you can tell the greatest because he's on his knees bowing in front of these people, but, you know, I listen to those actors, and I just pick it up, and I assimilate it into my work, and you can't get better than a Pacino interview, right? Or a De Niro interview, or a Spacey interview, or any of the women that are interviewed there. Every actor has their own individual style and their own individual work that they do. But all actors have a pool of tools that they dip into when they need them. And the more you watch, I mean, if you watch the Hollywood Reporter interviews, has anyone seen them? The round tables, if you go to YouTube, go to THR round tables, there's dozens of them, and they're the greatest directors, the greatest actors, and there's an hour that you can watch of these guys talking about George Clooney, who sold shoes and told stories about selling shoes, right? And the breaks that they got, and the work that they did that they hated, and so it's just a matter of building up the tools. And minimalism is about. I tell my people it's internal. You know, if I see someone going, right, I'm like, I can stop that, right? Because it's here. It's here and it's here. And that's where the camera sees it. The camera sees stuff that we can't see. But you see what the camera sees. And it's all here. It's in the heart. It's about love, and it's about life, and it's about the things that people have in their everyday life. And that's what good work is about, in my opinion. And that doesn't need to be dressed up at all.
And it's distinctly cinematic. You said in our initial interview, you said you had early on tried theater and didn't care for it.
No.
What turned you off?
The last theater I did was in Sydney, and I had a director who was all about projection, like whoever's sitting in the back. Can you hear me? Good. All right, that's all about it. Right. And it didn't matter if you were a good actor, and the intimacy of camera is that it can get up right in your face, and it can see you working. You know, people in the theater can't see you working. They're following, and I talked to a woman who was a very good stage actor, and there are certain ways that they use their technique bodily to display emotion. But if you're sitting in the back, you can't see my eyes, and the camera can see your eyes, and the camera can see you working. So what was the question?
What turned you off about theater?
Well, that was what, it was, like 5 shows a week and a matinee on Sunday, that's basically
What kind of acting did you do in Australia?
Everything.
Be more specific. Did you play...
Pick it up, take a drink, put it down, smile. Pick it up, put it down, smile. Walk from here to there, back to one, walk from here to there, walk from here to there, back to one. You know, you all got a general handle on what this is. You know, like my training has been good, but it's been on the job. I gave up smoking for a year or so. I'm lying in Perth on limestone cliffs, and we're shooting it's a feature film about the war. And I'm lying on this frickin' ground, and we're there for hours, and there's ants everywhere, and we're dirty because we're made up because we're in a battle. And someone said, "Do you want a cigarette?" I said, "Fuck yeah." So I had a cigarette, and then I started smoking again.
Was there a point where you like learned what? Because I imagine like this type of innocent acting just feels like you're living your life, and you trust that it's adding up to what you hope will be on the screen. Or have you? I know you're directing now, but have you always been? How did you learn that what you were doing added up to what you wanted on the camera? I bet you just said this.
Has anyone seen For Love of the Game? One person. This is good. Two persons. You should watch this film. It's Kevin Costner, and it's another baseball film. And he's pitching a perfect game. And it's a love story, all right? And God, I hope this answers this question. There's a moment in it where he's like in the sixth innings or something, or the seventh, and he shuts out the lights, and he shuts out the crowd, and this is all from point of view, his point of view. And everything's gone, the sound is gone, everything's gone, and all he sees is the batter and the catcher and the umpire, and everything else is gone. And if you're in the moment, if you're working in this industry and those 15 people around you disappear and the camera disappears and everyone disappears and the only people that are in the room are you and the person you're working with, then you have achieved the art form, I think. Because what you're searching for in the other actor is that grain of truth that they're going to give you, that moment where you connect and you know, if you've been doing this long enough, you know they don't have to call cut again because you know you got it. You just know you got it, you know, and it's an amazing moment. I won't cry. But it's what I live for, you know. It's just if you're working with someone who is at your level and you connect, camera just loves it. The camera just absolutely eats it up. Yeah.
Were you surprised to see that for the first time after you had done a scene? I've always searched for it in my work. I've always looked for it in other people. It's because I'm a psychopath or something. It's like, I always look for that person to come to me and give me something, and you know, it's like a lover. You know they're going to give you something that is valuable and important. It's a great moment. It really is great.
What attracts you to a role?
Am I in Hollywood? Directors. Yeah, directors. I do, like I Google a lot. And I go, my God, look at this. You know, they don't have to have hits. They just have to be serious filmmakers who tell stories about people. You know, I love stories about people. I mean, you know, I'm tired. I don't even go to multiplexes and watch the dribble that the Hollywood pumps out. You know, I'll watch Megan's film and Sheldon's film, and you know, I don't care for. You know, there's a level of acting that is really serious, and directing, which is really serious, which is about films about people. And then there's that Hollywood stuff, which is really, if you look really closely at those films, there's no human contact in them. There's no, you know, it's all show. It's like a picture show. But there's nothing that you can feel and go, my God, you know? Yeah.
That's a good answer.
All right.
Yeah.
Two ex-genius winners.
No checked, yes. It's true. You continue to study acting, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned that, and I was wondering what you get from that.
Well, I do improv when I can, and I have been like for a few months. But what I do is I teach younger actors what I know, and I was always careful not to teach them my technique, because I don't want my technique. I don't want to know my technique. My technique is inherent. But what I teach them is what. Oh, is that my phone? What I try and teach them is that. How much time do I have? I was having coffee with someone a few weeks back. She was from Chicago, Claire O'Connor, who I've shot with, and she's really good. And I was looking out the window, and this woman was walking up the street. Okay, so that's the shot. You know, there's a woman walking up the street. Okay, pretty boring. But then she turned, as she was walking, she turned around and looked at her image in the shop windows. All right. And I said that. I said, Claire, look at this. Look at that. You didn't see it, but this is what happened. She was walking up the street and she turned to look at her image in the window. All right. Now, what does that do to you if you're watching the film? You're going, oh, okay. So is this vanity? What is this? Right. And then, you know, so she kept on walking, but what if she stopped? What if she looked in the window with nothing on her face and just looked at herself? I mean, that would add even more layers to the character. And that's what filmmaking should be about. I think it's about those layers that make people interesting. What was the question?
It was about studying.
Well, and anyway, so what I find is that the more I tell them, the more I teach them, the more I learn myself about acting and about what I love about and what I like about it. You know?
And when I wrote that question down, I was like, oh, well, maybe with actors, there's no way to practice alone. And the more you talked about this space between you and another actor, that it's something that needs to be kept alive by active use, this muscle of acting connection. Did I just make up a bunch of bullshit?
No, I do. I work with K-Jazz, and when I can, I go to other classes. But I've been really busy since January and other things. And, but I learn a lot by talking to other people, to other actors, about the really serious stuff, about what we do, how crazy we are, and that's who we are. And I try and engage in the worst possible things that I can get into so that I keep my center alive.
We're winding down, so I want to open it up to the audience. Have any questions? Hello, sir.
What about Titanic?
Titanic?
Yeah. Wasn't that wonderful?
Not if you were on it. Actually, you know what? My appreciation of Leonardo DiCaprio has gone through the roof since that film. Next question.
Any other questions?
There was someone in the back there with that. Hi.
Hi, I want to ask a question. Maybe I shouldn't be allowed to ask questions. I didn't call to have my discussion, but I'm just curious. I know you're going to probably deflect this and not really answer the question, but do you have like a proudest thing, like a picture or a project you worked on that you're just like, this is the best thing I ever did? Do you have anything like that?
No, really. You know, when I shot Martin Bono, I had a gambling addiction at the time. So they flew me to Reno. And they put me up in Harrods. So this was not a good thing. But the funny thing is that circumstance in my life actually made Martin Bono a better film and a better character. Because I was really depressed and I really wasn't going to come back from Reno. I was done. So I always trust that. No, my work. I don't look at my. I look at my work and I cringe. I really do. But I always trust that the circumstances that I'm in at the time that I'm shooting are the circumstances I need to be in for the film. Yeah. Okay.
Hello.
Hi. So you said you were going to cry, and I cried, so you're welcome. No, but I'm kidding. But I'm interested. You say you speak with, you teach a lot of students, and I'm curious if those of us in this crowd are interested in working with you. How do we do so?
It's very simple. There's a little place in Bellevue called Tea Latte, and I just go there and I talk about acting, and I try and figure out what the person's about. I mean, there's shortcuts you can take, and really, I try and direct them into internal work and not external work. It's that simple. I mean, you can do external work by dressing a certain way, but you cannot cheat on what the camera's seeing. You cannot cheat on it. You cannot lie to the camera. Unless you're meant to be lying, in which case the camera sees that, and that's good. Yeah, it's simple. You just Facebook me, and I'm always open to
So you
what.
Facebook you is what you're saying.
Yeah, Facebook me.
Alright.
It's.
Like cry during that, so I wanted to know.
Yeah, well, if I can make you cry, then my work is good.
Your work is good.
Thank you.
Get a room.
I will say that.
One more. And then we'll wrap it up.
So, if you were to win this award, the Genius Award, what would the profits, or what would the award go towards? Would it go towards a project of your own undertaking?
Pretty much. Yeah, I just spent. If any of you are filmmakers and you want to submit to a festival and your film is good, I recommend SIF, of course. And but I just went to Traverse City in Michigan, Michael Moore's Film Festival, and I saw some films that taught me so much. I mean, it is an amazing, eclectic collection of incredible filmmakers, and I'm rewriting the script right now, and I think it'll probably go to some sort of pre-production teaser for investors if I win. And I've got to say it is an honor to be here tonight, and I regard my work seriously, but at the same time I don't regard anything outside my work as having sense in my life. Watching your own films is hell, and anyone who's done it is who's here is like, I know what you mean. You know, it's a really weird industry, and if your work is good, you're done. You know, you really don't want to see it because your work is done. You know it was good work, and it will be out there in the world, and it will do whatever it has to do. But yeah, it'll go. It won't pay bills because I think I'm up to scratch on most of them.
All right, we're going to have to wrap it up, but thank you. Another really wonderful performance from you in that movie.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul.
Do I have to leave?
Yep, you gotta go. Not that far.
I mean, like, do I have to get out now?
No. Stick around, please. All right, we're gonna move on to our second nominee, which is Bob Nelson, screenwriter. Real Seattleites will understand that from the 90s, Bob Nelson was a writer and performer on the beloved sketch comedy TV show Almost Live. That has nothing to do with why we're here. That's just his own achievement on his own. After the show stopped production in 1999, Bob decided to write his first screenplay, and two miraculous things happened. First, right off the bat, he wrote a really special screenplay. Just investigating, it's for the film Nebraska. Hopefully a lot of you have seen it. So the work between a man and the paper is exemplary. And then this second Cinderella story of being picked up and by Alexander Payne, filmmaker, and ending up with an Independent Spirit Award for Best Screenplay and an Oscar nomination for Best Screenplay. Right off the bat. So that must be delightful. And now, even on top of this, forget the Oscar thing. Now he's been nominated for a Genius Award by It's thrilled to have you here. So please, here's a clip from Nebraska, written by Bob Nelson.
What do you think, old man?
Looks about the same.
That's true. This is about how your mother kept it.
My dad built this place.
Really? Wait, you don't mean by himself?
Yeah, before I was born. His brothers helped. I got it.
This was my room.
That's where Woody's brother David died.
You remember that, Dad?
I was there. This was my parents' room. I get whipped if they found me in here. Guess nobody's gonna whip me now. And barn's still standing.
Hello.
Hello, David.
Thank you so much.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
Good. I like the show. That because I actually pitched that as a sketch and almost lied and they went by it. I said, "Well, what if it's in Kent?" And they said,
it's to have that scene represent a screenwriter. It might seem a little coarse, but it gets at everything that. Well, one reason I picked is because it's what you talked to New York Magazine about as the toughest scene you wrote in the film.
Yes, that's right.
And so that got me kind of fixated on it. But then also just, I think I'm bringing a lot of my own bias about what I expected fear from a first screenplay. And I've seen a lot of plays by young writers, and they are full of characters who speak like playwrights. And everyone is a secret writer trapped in their mouth, waiting to come out. And what it takes to write taciturn characters, like it seems like an iceberg where there's all this work and then just a few syllables pop up, and throughout the film it's kind of flawless what you've done with getting your voice out there in the voice of really taciturn people who aren't hungry to self-dramatize at all.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, the part of the reason is that the character of Woody is based on my own dad, and it turned out in writing it, and then as they shot it with Bruce Dern, he came out a little more curmudgeonly and taciturn. But my dad was a man of few words, so starting with him as the main character when I was writing it, that kind of set the tone for the rest of the movie anyway. So that was nice to actually not have this verbose character that I had to try and come up with clever lines throughout the movie for that. And for instance, for those of you who have seen the movie, there are some uncles who, back in Nebraska in the movie, don't talk much either. They talk less than Woody does. And those are based on my own uncles. They would come over to our house when I was growing up after not seeing each other for many years. And they would sit there for long periods of time without talking. A lot of them were farmers. Some of them actually moved out here and were up in the Ferndale area. So this movie is actually kind of based on both of those. And they would sit there for a long time, and all of a sudden, one of them would say, "You still got that Chevy." And that could last a half an hour. But it was always fascinating to me. I love those guys. They were great guys. They worked out on the farm, and they gave up their bodies for our food. And there's a scene in the movie where they're all staring and watching the television set, and that's like a Rorschach test. I've never seen so many people interpret that scene so many different ways, from that we're showing a bunch of mute morons to it's a very touching moment to see these brothers, even though they don't communicate, they're communicating in their own way. I've seen everything in between that, in that one shot, and it wasn't even my shot. Alexander staged it that way. That was all, yeah.
I feel like he has a little residue of people finding him mocking of his characters, and I wonder if a little of that splashed onto you, because I didn't see any mocking at all.
That would have been, one of the criticisms of the film, that we're mocking Midwesterners. And again, that's where my family comes from. Alexander Payne started as a satirist, and even though he's moved into dramedy, there's always a little bit of that in his movies. He jokes, I would say he jokes gentle fun with everyone in his movies. When he moved out to California to do Sideways, you could look at it as making fun of those characters, and when he went to Hawaii, the same thing. So I can understand when people say you're making fun of these simple Midwesterners who don't talk much and they talk about the weather. But Alexander is an equal opportunity mocker, and he enjoys that, but he does love his characters.
Yeah, I feel that I'm always a little surprised when people are like, he hates the world. He does not hate the world. He hates things. Tell us about the genesis of the basic story, for where you got the story for Nebraska.
Well, again, for those of you who saw Almost Live, and by the way, if you ever watched that show in the 90s, you would have probably assumed that when it ended, I was not going to continue on as an actor. I considered myself primarily a writer on that show, and I was the one who would go through the newspapers looking for a segment we called the John Report, which was our weekend update, our news report during the show. And I actually saw an article in the Seattle Times in the late 90s about this sort of thing happening, where older people would go all the way across the country with their sweepstakes notices to cash them in because they were in early Alzheimer's or something else was going on with them, and they did not trust putting it in the mail. So there was an article, an AP story about this happening, and I just had this in the back of my mind. And after I'd been fired from about my third show here in Seattle, I decided it might be time to try and write that up as a movie. It was time.
And when you were were there early terrible versions of this where you were still kind of writing sketchy as opposed to this deep plunge in the character?
Yes, I mean, I'd never written anything longer than 3 minutes before that, and even some of those sagged in the middle. So, writing an hour and 45 minutes was tough, so many of the humorous scenes in Nebraska actually came first, and then I had to go back and try to find the dramatic story and to try and write drama, which I had never done before. So that was a big test. If you saw the movie and you see them stealing the compressor from the wrong people, I know this is a spoiler, but if you haven't seen the movie yet, too bad. But that was one of the first scenes I wrote, and if you look at that scene in its entirety, it almost is a sketch. So when I went back to rewrite it, I had to try and tamp it down a little bit and not make it too sketchy. But there were other things in it. So it did turn into just one big joke. So.
Once they were on shooting, were you involved in shooting? Were you around for writing, or were you just kind of watching from afar?
I watched from afar, except for 1 week. Alexander Payne has been doing that 20 years. Once he gets a script, he wants to, and he did some rewriting on this and changed it into an Alexander Payne movie. And so he basically wants to own it in his own way once he takes over. He was very respectful. He could have rewritten it enough to take a screen credit, and he did. So in a way, that's kind of unusual for a director at his level who is also a writer. So he did some work of it on his own. But he did invite me to the set for a week, and he said, "Don't come the first week, because I have to establish authority on the set. I don't want anybody disturbing that." He said, so I went for a week after that, and I took my mother, which was great because they shot in the area where she grew up and where I had based the story in northeast Nebraska, and she got a walk-on role as woman number one walking to the buffet bar. She nailed it. I was surprised she wasn't the seventh nomination for that. And I say surprised, she was pissed, but
Speaking of that, tell us about what getting a ride on the Academy Awards roller coaster is like.
It's bizarre. I mean, it's funny that the further I am from it, it seems even more surreal because everywhere you turn, you're seeing these people that you never knew, and you're going through these interviews you've never done before, and you're seeing quotes of you in print that you never said. And, I mean, one of my favorites is somebody said, "Oh, well, how do you get to get this point?" And I said, "Well, there's three elements when you're in any enterprise like this, especially a writer. There's whatever talent you bring to it. There's hard work, and there's luck. And there's only one of those things that you have control of, and that's the hard work." And it comes out in the paper, it says, Bob Nelson credits his success to his talent. That's the kind of thing you do on that one. It's nice, you get to hang out with these people. There's a luncheon for the Academy people, and they sat at the table with Meryl Streep, which is great. And someone says, "Do you want to meet her?" I said, "Well, okay." And I go over to meet her, and the person is saying, Bob Nelson, the writer-screenwriter of Nebraska, wants to meet you. And just as she's saying that, this guy steps in front of me that I know, and he starts talking. And I'm looking down, and Meryl Streep is looking up at me, and she's starting to look like that, look at her phone. And so when I finally got rid of the guy, I had to apologize because it's like a bad sitcom going on here. And then they make you get up on risers, and I was one of the first ones to get up when I was standing next to her. And you have to clap for 170 people. So if you're up there first, you're clapping the whole time. And Kate Blanchett comes and stands in front of me, and I'm clapping, and she throws her head back, and I clap her head. So within a half an hour, I'd ruined all chances of working with her. So that's the kind of indignity you go through. It's fun.
When you were working on this, did you, or even pre-writing this, did you have kind of mentor screenplays you studied, or even favorite screenplays you got closer to, or even stayed away from, so you didn't hate them?
I actually went back to the old screenplays. I mean, most people my age, the first thing that really hit them, they were watching Lassie, and all of a sudden, To Kill a Mockingbird comes out. And I read the book when I was 7 years old, and then the movie came out right after that. And that basically changes your whole perception at that time when you're that young. So I went back and I read that, and I read a lot of Billy Wilder, and I read Hal Ashby, because they both worked on films where there was a combination of drama and comedy going on, and it's a hard thing to pull off. So I was going back to the classics for the most part.
And Paul said that he would rather die than watch his films. Can you enjoy watching a film you wrote?
Well, I've only
can you enjoy watching Nebraska?
It is weird because after a while, I mean, now I'm to the point where I really can't watch the first half of it. I still can enjoy some parts of the second half, but I need to take long breaks in between it at this point. Because I did do the circuit, and you really have to sit through the whole thing for, a dozen times. But I try to do is look for different things. I'll watch, about halfway through those, I started watching Will Forte and thinking, he didn't get a lot of credit for this. People say, he did a good job, but I'm watching him thinking, he really pulled this off to me. And at first I was a little worried. I hadn't seen him doing anything like this. Or I'll watch Bruce Dern work. That's how you get through it at a certain point.
We're getting towards the end, so let's open it up to the audience. Anybody got a question? I have more. People don't. Paul.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
When you wrote this, did you get to the point where you presented it to people, and did they say, what were the critiques like? Because as a deeply felt work, you knew it.
Yeah.
But did other people see it?
Well, here's what I did. A lot of you probably know Bill Nye the Science Guy. He also started at Almost Live. And I was getting ready to move to LA, and I'd written this. And Bill Nye came back to do an adult science show, so he invited me to go to that. And I had just written it right before that. So now I'm here for a year. I plan to go to LA and try and shop it and get a job running television. So in the meantime, I thought, well, I have a year, I'll send it to these film writing contests. Because I knew people in television in LA, but I didn't know anyone on the screen side. So I thought, well, I'll cherry pick the ones that would seem to like this type of story. And I picked 5 of them and I sent it to them, and it was rejected in the first round on all 5. It didn't go anywhere. And then the 5th one called up and said there was a mistake. There was another Bob Nelson. So submitted a script, and yours is actually advancing and his isn't. And I said, oh yeah, I know that other Bob Nelson, he's crap. Yeah, so thank you very much. But it kept advancing, so I had to tell my boss at the Nye show that I had this screenplay that was advancing, and if you got in the final 5 in that, you got to go down there and do kind of an internship where they do a workshop of your script. So I said I might have to leave early, and she asked to read it, and she just happened to know the producers of Nebraska from a charity thing. And she read it and said, this sounds like the kind of thing they might be interested in, and can I send it to them? And I said, absolutely. So, I got extremely lucky. She short-circuited all the work I was going to do when I got down to LA. So and that's why I say 3 elements. One is luck. Yeah. And that is very lucky. Otherwise, I would have been down writing for some sitcom or something, peddling this movie, and who knows what would have happened, or who would have gotten their whole hands on it, and how they would have changed it.
When you were writing this, did you see it in color or monochrome? And
absolutely. My first page of it says a truck drives down the golden flyways of Nebraska. Did you have a follow-up to that? I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, well, then who made the decision how to go to monochrome?
That was all Alexander Payne.
Right.
He'd been looking for black and white to do, and when he read this, he saw the austerity of the script, and he said, this is the one that I'm going to go for. Now, our script was first at a company called Paramount Vantage, which did more independent style movies, but it was still attached to the studio. Well, all of those started to fall apart at the studios, except for Fox Searchlight is doing really well. And it ended up going to the main Paramount studio, and we all thought, well, they're not going to do this movie. They're going to give it up to Fox Searchlight or maybe Focus at Universal, still doing all right. And so they brought in Alexander Payne for a meeting when he said he was ready to shoot it, and he explained to him the movie, and they said, you know what, we want to keep this here. We're going to give you $16 million, and we're not going to interfere. You go out and do the movie that you want. And they all stood up and they shook hands, and Alexander said, that's great. By the way, it's in black and white. So everyone sat down again. And the conversation continued for a year. And from 16 million, Paramount at first cut it down to $3 million. And then it gradually, they kept working back and forth. They got it back up to 12.5 million. So he did have to lop off over $3 million to shoot it black and white.
Hi.
Oh, hi, Megan. I have a question. How do you feel about it being in black and white now that you've seen it in black and
I love it in black and white. And actually, when Alexander said he was going to shoot in black and white, I love that idea. I knew it would take off some box office, but I was very happy. So, and it was on a cable, what is it called, Epix. A week ago, they showed it in color, one time showing only in color. And so I had to watch it. I thought, it's okay, but I liked it. Yes?
How has,
Okay.
how has an Oscar nomination affected your writing prospects from then on? Are you getting sought out for projects, or does it give you more freedom?
Yeah, it absolutely has helped. And I have been being sent projects I wouldn't have before this film was made. So that part of it helps, but once you get in the room and start doing your pitch and working on things, then you're just a writer again that they give tons of notes to. But it gets you in the room.
One more. Hello.
Hi. Do you feel like talking about the Bruce Dern piece of it, how that happened and what that was like for
Yeah, I hadn't pictured Bruce, but Alexander worked with Laura Dern on his first movie, Citizen Ruth, and he met Bruce. And he said that when he first read it, Bruce Dern was the first guy he thought of. Again, when they got to Paramount, and all of a sudden there's this back and forth on money, they asked Alexander to go through the list of the older and bigger name actors. So he auditioned a lot of people, and at the end of the day, he said, Bruce is still my guy. I got to meet Bruce a lot during the process. He's a great guy. He's nothing like the character in the movie. Bruce has never had a drink of alcohol in his life. He's never smoked or even drank pot. He was always a runner his whole life, very healthy. And he talks forever, and he has great stories. So he's nothing like Woody.
I think that's it. Thank you so much. My colleague Charles Udede, film editor of this film.
Good evening. So thank you for coming tonight. I want to just get into it. Drew Christie is my subject, and we're going to show a short film by him, and then I will just talk afterwards. I must warn you that I'm a big admirer of Drew Christie. From the very start, when I saw his film, I was already drawn. His first film, I was immediately drawn to his work. And then there's a long story behind that, and we'll discuss that later on. But tonight, one of the things that's going to be very difficult for me is I developed a friendship with him. And so interviewing him will feel ridiculous. Because we've just talked about everything on Earth. And it'll feel phony that I'm interested in him in that way. And yet we sort of throw ourselves, and this has been the case in our encounters, we throw ourselves into a discussion that swirls. And often, so I just want to warn you about that. I mean, I really, and I think so this is very important. But let's just watch this clip, and then we'll come back and we'll talk in a second. Thank you.
First off, hi, I'm Tylan Bertzloff. Got a rough life, but it could be worse off. Honestly, I'm on the streets, constantly running to freaks. Set on fire, struck by lightning, liked it so much it became frightening. My homeboy got killed, homegirl popped pills. Stayed up late nights just trying to not feel. Yes, I'm a rapper, not a full rocker. Rather play dodgeball instead of play soccer. I spit like I can mack it with cat. Tip of the hat, I'm half white and half black, but there ain't no difference, so why you worrying about that? My dad and me lived in a car outside in Everett. He was worried about me, like, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna take care of my son? And I feel like if you say something hurts, you're just reaffirming the pain. I'm like just sitting there having the time of my life, picturing myself fighting a dragon. So I have a stick and I'm fighting this dragon because it's all hot, but it's invisible. So I attacked the dragon and won. Yeah, I was 8. Me and my dad would go stand under the bridge that connects Everett to Marysville. It was pretty nice. As soon as my head hit the sand, I fell asleep. But as soon as I live in a house, it's like so difficult to sleep for me. Like I'm so accustomed to sleeping outside or on a roof or something. I noticed a lot of people, like if I needed help, they wouldn't help me. They would say, oh, get a job, you bum, and stuff. So I tried to apply for Wendy's. It's not the best job, but it's a job. The manager that I was actually talking to told me to my face, you're big and you look like you would steal the money from the cash register or you would intimidate the customers. I'm sorry, goodbye. So I'd be like, ha ha ha, cool, thanks, and just shove it off my shoulder, but it would hurt deep inside. I try my best, but I see hundreds of people doing thousands of times better than me. If I do my best and can't make it, then I have to find some other way of survival. I went over and to the gas station and bought food for this homeless couple that had nothing and no shoes or anything. I took off my shoes and gave the guy my shoes. I walked around. I couldn't take a bus because no shoes, but I did it. I'm trying to help people that like are homeless, street kids and stuff, because a lot of my friends die because of winter and they've gotten into chronic meth and other stuff. So I'm trying to stop that. I want them to be positive. It really hurts to have people not really care what happens, but I'm not gonna quit because, I mean, if they give up on themselves, then the world wins. My dad's taught me a lot. Like, I mean, he was my hero, still is. He's the one that got me into rapping, and I feel like this is the person that would go to hell or high waters for me. And so it felt good to have someone I could actually trust. It feels like things are actually looking up for me for once, finally. Because there are positive things. Sorry. Off with his head, so said the beast inside. If we listen to the beast, then our souls have died. We fight and fight, but is it a pointless cause? Why do so many people just want to focus on our flaws? Aw, man, it's about to get heavy. I'm like your worst nightmare. You can call me Freddy. Come on, man, and grab my machete. I'll slice and dice the mic thrice like confetti. Only difference is I ain't playing no more. I have won the battle, but now I'm going to war.
I have to say, every time I watch something you've made, I always come up with like, oh my God, I just noticed something. And I know we're not going to, I promise you that we're not going to go around and sort of like talk about like the usual sort of like, oh, what was your inspiration and all this stuff. But in this particular clip, The Devil Inside, I just noticed for the first time looking against your other work, this was the first time that I've seen work where you went into historical research. I mean, it was an interesting, you know what I mean? If I'm correct about this.
No, yeah, definitely. And that could, I mean, that has to do with the fact that it was, this was that's part of a fellowship, and so there's a directive involved with it, which is, it needs to be about family homelessness in the area right now. So there's no historical portion to that, so that takes up that. And there is, there's research aspect, but it's more, like first-person account thing. So I don't get to do like a lot of research. No, that's true.
So I just jumped ahead of myself. If you've seen his earlier work, he always involves some piece of research that's either along the lines of science or sociology or historical research. And he'll pick a subject and just explode it and take it in a completely bizarre, or the story's already so bizarre that, he'll it's the person who...
The guy who killed John Wilkes Booth?
Yeah, which one is that one?
The guy who killed John Wilkes Booth? Oh, that's what you're going to talk about because he cut his dick off.
sorry. That was the first one I didn't watch.
He cut his balls on him.
Yes.
Portion of the body.
And that's what, right. So what's so interesting was this was still strong to me. I thought, oh no, he's 100% dependent on finding oddities in American history, right?
I'm 100% dependent on that.
But in this film, you're not. I thought it was still fucking amazing. And it's stuff like, there's no, where's the history in this? Yeah. It's a rap, and it uses all these things, and it's not this usual thing. So I still think it still captures some. So I discovered I don't know you as well as I should.
I try and stretch myself a little bit each time. And so, this was a bit of a stretch for me, and so I always try and do something that I think is slightly different, or else I get bored. I don't want to get bored.
I could never imagine you getting bored, by the way. But
I haven't yet, because I just got a new musical instrument, which keeps me really occupied. A guy gave me it's called a rhubarb. Does anyone know what this is? It's like it's a relative of the sitar, but it comes from Afghanistan. I just want to play that all the time. That's all I want to do. That's why I won't get bored.
Well, so there's this thing where I know you do stuff with the New York Times, right? You do stuff with Vanity Fair, and you've also had your stuff on at Sundays, right? And I also know you were a student of somebody here.
Yeah, Megan.
Megan is a student of film. And so, and this is interesting to me because when I read about your work, those animation, there's this strong cinematic element in it. I mean, maybe that's the thing I just didn't focus on so much.
Yeah, do you want me to talk about that?
Yes, why not? Just talk about that.
Yeah, I guess there is. I grew up only watching, films. I didn't really watch that many cartoons. I would watch Tailspin sometimes when I got home from school. And I would watch some cartoons, but not very many. I mainly liked, like my VHS collection was like, all the Spielberg and George Lucas stuff, and then it started expanding a bit to the Ridley Scott movies and that sort of thing. And that's what I'd watch all the time. And I was always interested in making films with, live action films with human beings. And it wasn't until I was maybe in late high school that I kind of started to feel like this is a really annoying thing to have to wait around for people and try and convince people to show up and try and get people to come to something. I'll just do it all myself. And I'm kind of a control freak anyway, so it suited me. Just drawing it all myself or just being in charge of the whole thing, like no other people.
I want to ask you a nice horrible question for Pete. How fucking long did it take to do something like that?
Well, this one was, it's like what everyone was saying, it's not the most comfortable thing to watch, I don't think, because this one I had to do in 2 weeks, and I don't, there's so many things got rushed on it, so it's not pleasant for me to watch, but it can range, it depends, it can go from like, a week and a half to some take as long as 2 or 3 months for something that's only, 5 minutes long.
What is it you don't like about that particular show?
I said
what makes you cringe when you're watching it?
I don't want to say because then everyone will know what.
I want to know. You cringe. Give us one scene that made you like, I wish I'd done. I didn't notice a damn thing wrong with it.
Well, then why would I alter that percentage?
Like to look into the box and to see what the machinery is doing.
And I'm here to stop you from doing
Fair enough. But then, and so let's go back to one thing we always talk about. We used to, when I first met Drew, we went to a bar and we just sat down and started just talking about Blade Runner.
We're talking about Blade Runner, which is a favorite film.
And he loaned me a little book, which he finally, I didn't return it long enough. He finally said, Charles, you can have it.
I got a new one.
So, but the thing was that one of the things we talked about was just like the way you sort of plan your projects. And I was sort of fascinated because we talked about one that you haven't done yet, which is on the gun issue in the USA. And I'm sorry, I mean, you accumulate a vast amount of knowledge about a particular subject, even if it's a short film, before you shoot it. And I just wanted this idea, this research aspect, is really fascinating.
Yeah, I think that comes from, I read like a lot. Like I read way more than anyone really needs to read, unless they're in college or something. I don't know why you need to read as much as I do, but I read a lot. And so I actually, the reading displaced like all my film viewing. I don't even watch that much stuff anymore. I just kind of read a lot. And so the only way for me to synthesize the information that I read is to turn it into my own things and to kind of write my own interpretations of what I read. It's actually kind of like, I was really bad in school when I was little. And it's like I'm now making up for all the reports I didn't do and all the things, because I'll read something and I kind of create in a way my own little report on it, and I do my own little drawings, and then it becomes its own little world each time I read something. And I read a lot of nonfiction. I only read some fiction, and I make it so, I don't know if this is on purpose, but whenever I read fiction, it ends up being like, I read most recently this Thomas Pynchon's book, Mason Dixon. It's like 800, yeah, the whole thing. Is that crazy? It's like 800 something pages, and it's all written in like this 18th century dialect with like experimental spelling, because there wasn't like regulated spelling yet and all this crazy stuff. And so that puts me off for like at least 3 or 4 years of never reading fiction. So I just read nonfiction stuff, and sometimes it's kind of dry, and so I try and like, you know, jazz it up a bit with some humor or something when I'm reimagining it. But it all comes back to the fact that I read way too much.
And that sort of, and you translate that into, compress it into your films, or?
Yeah, I guess I compress it, and then I figure out how to get someone to pay me for my little book report I did.
And so let's speak of the New York Times. How do you, do they come to you with an idea, or do you go to them with something you already have in your head?
It could go either way, but usually they'll, like every couple of weeks or something, they'll be like, hey, do you have any ideas for something you want to do? Or do you have, like, I did this one on eels and that sort of thing, and they were like, oh, do you have any, you know, it's like Thanksgiving is coming up. Do you have any ideas for things related to Thanksgiving? And I just read this book about eels and how eels used to be a big part of the Thanksgiving dinner. At least they were the first Thanksgiving. They were the very first Thanksgiving.
Before the turkey, correct.
Before the turkey. They said there was wildfowl. This is there was venison, wildfowl, and eel. So that's first Thanksgiving.
By the way, I just wanted to explain this. New York Times has a thing called the Up Docs. And basically, they have a short documentary about a subject that's current. So you'll do one that's sort of Thanksgiving, or it would be,
I recently did one, like an obituary one that they had.
Oh, for JJ.
For the magazine, yeah, for JJK.
Yeah. That was which is beautiful, by the way, and broke my heart. By the way, I did not know at all that I'm not a classic rock fan, or at least I don't pay attention to it. Yeah. I did not know he wrote the Cocaine Song.
Yeah, he wrote the Cocaine Song.
Yeah, if you've seen this, you have to just go onto the web and see. It's heartbreaking. And again, you always choose subjects that seem to me incredibly sad, but funny.
Yeah, I guess, I think the two usually go hand in hand almost always. So.
That was a stupid question. Of course, I'm going to even laughs at deaths in my family. And it's true, of course. Maybe knows this. It's like, but it's just like, I know, but I've always, that's the fact that I think I've been drawn in terms of like the things you sort of look at and you sort of bring in. I mean, when the person tries to kill Abraham Lincoln, I mean, the thing that when he cut off his penis, I actually kind of thought it was funny.
I did too. I did too. When I read it, I was like, what? I was like, wait, this is so weird. Like, how is this? Yeah, no, I know. Like, and all these people made movies movies about Abraham Lincoln. Why did they ever make? Why did they just end it? It would have only been like 5 minutes. Just the guy cuts his dick off and he kills General Too. Why did? I would bring that in. I don't know why Steven Spielberg didn't do that. It's crazy.
The guy who killed Abraham Lincoln's killer.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, exactly. I mean, like
Did
that's
that off before?
before, not like right before, no, but it wasn't like but yeah, it was, he do you want to know the full story? Okay, so this guy, his name was Boston Corbett, and he took that. So here's the thing: he was a hatter, and in New York City, he was a hatter, and he his wife and died giving childbirth, and so this really destroyed him, and he started drinking really heavily, and seeing prostitutes and doing all sorts of bad stuff. And one day he's in a total drunken stupor, and he's up in Boston, I don't know why, and he sees a street preacher. The street preacher's giving a whole sermon. He becomes a born-again Christian, changes his name to the city that happened in Boston, and then he becomes like a itinerant preacher. He joins the Union Army at the outbreak of the war. He ends up getting captured, and he's kept at Andersonville. If anyone knows civil history, is a local place. And so he almost dies. He's in a prisoner swamp. He's brought back. Then he's kind of, somehow no one knows how, but he's put in kind of an elite unit, and he's put in charge of, after John Wilkes Booth kills Lincoln, there was a search party put out in Virginia area for John Wilkes Booth. And so they finally find him at the farm where John Wilkes Booth is, and he was in the barn, and they've been given strict orders not to kill Booth. They're like, under no circumstances will you kill this guy. We need to figure out what happened, why, who he's working with, all sorts of stuff. So they find him, they set the barn on fire. Booth is probably about to come out. He's shooting a little bit, but he's going to come out because he's wounded. And Boston Corbett goes up to the window, the little crack in the barn, and shoots Booth. Oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you. He cut off his whole thing. It was like a week or two before. He saw some prostitutes, and he got like aroused, and he felt guilty about that.
Oh.
That makes sense.
The usual reason. But he, and then anyway, he killed Booth, and he wasn't supposed to, and he didn't get any of his reward, and he ended up living in the side of a hill, and then they think he died in an angry fire in Minnesota in 1892 or something.
This is absolutely terrible.
There's no book on him. There's never been a book written on him. I find it.
He didn't think it was painter.
Yes.
Like Van Gogh.
Yeah, I guess I'm sure it's a connection or something.
You kept his memory alive.
I feel a connection with him.
And then let's talk about the thing that when you got into Sundance, that was a moment that you sort of got some national recognition. Is that a fair
In 2012 I did that one song with Swindle, and that's how a lot of I got contacted with doing work for the New York Times and all that stuff. And that definitely helped. Helped a lot. I guess just helped me out a lot for sure.
Are you expecting anything? How do you feel this? I don't want to ask you this, but how do you your confidence stuff? You feel yourself talented, or do you think you go anywhere? It's a good question.
I basically just thought that I would probably just work my normal menial jobs that I had done, but I would just would continue to do my same things I always do on the side of the night, like I had been doing, because it's just, I don't do any of the things I do for any other thing other than that. It's all I'm compelled to do. I'm compelled to, write something and do some drawings and realize it, and that's just, I'm compelled to do that. I don't know why, and that's just what my brain tells me to do that, so that's what I do. I would just do it the same if someone was paying me or they weren't or whatever. It's just, it's, you know, you gotta get through the day somehow.
And then I forgot that actually Vanity Fair was also non-historical.
That's true. I don't write those. I don't write those anyway, so.
You receive them from
I receive them from somewhere up in the clouds and they come down and I don't write them.
If you see Vanity Code is if you ever get a chance to get it done on every different letters. And it's a part of the comedy in terms of your animation, incredible timing with your images. It's hard to explain. You went so much that you're completely wrong. But you have to the images have to capture the language and the timing of the comic comments.
Yeah, it's really timing based stuff. It's why it's a lot of it's like silent film stuff. It's all timing oriented, you know, and like a lot of there was a really great silent film guy that not that many people know now, but at the time he was really big. His name was Charlie Bowers or Charles Bowers. He also did animation too, and all his stuff is really like all about timing. He was kind of like, have you ever seen that Woody Allen movie Sweet and Low Down where Sean Penn's character is always like, oh, there's this guy, Django Reinhardt, he's big, he's like, I'm almost as good. That's kind of Charlie Bowers with Charlie Chaplin. Like, people now only know Charlie Chaplin, but at the time, Charlie Bowers was kind of like right up there. But he also did animation, and all this stuff is like, it's very, very much like timer oriented. It's like, you know, it's just certain things have to happen at certain times, or nothing works, you know. It's not really.
I want to take it over to the floor. I'm going to get a few more minutes left. Anybody have any questions to ask? No? Yes, at the back.
You were talking about never being bored earlier, and I think for non-animators in the world, it's hard to imagine spending that much time doing that much minute drawing and not becoming bored. But obviously that's not the case for you, so I wondered if you could translate that experience a little bit to us who are non-animators out here.
Yeah, that's really good. Okay. Well, I'll run you through like my day and how that goes. My cat wakes me up at 3 in the morning, and then she wakes me up at 4 and 5, and then at like 6 or 7 something, I'm usually ready to go. And I'll start, you know, working. I'll sit down, and if it's one that I'm working on that's like completely in the computer, like the Vanity Code series is all in the computer. I'll work that, right? So I have KUOW streaming on one thing, right? So I can like get my user information, and I can hear whether the Dow's up or down. You just listen on the way here. The Dow's up, the Dow's down. What does that matter? Okay, so then I have like my music going on something else, right? And so I have music going too. And you know, that could be anything. I like music from all over the world, so it could be anything. Then I also sometimes like to have I'll have like my laptop with like a documentary going in the background. Which is so I like to have like 3, sometimes even like a second source of music too. So like, it's like a real cacophony going. So my brain and my ears are like being bombarded with information at all times. So I feel like it's like a little war zone. It's like a story war zone. And I'm like, always have to be on my toes. And then so I'm drawing something, and then I'm getting like totally off task. I'm like, oh wait, what? Wait, oh my god, no. Yeah, I'm like listening to all this stuff. So I'm like, it's probably an extremely frightening situation for anyone to walk into, but for me, it like keeps me on my toes and it keeps me from being bored. And even if I'm drawing the same thing over and over again, my memory of it is each thing that I was hearing at the time that I was doing each frame. So each one's kind of different because I have different information associated with each frame and memory related information. So is that?
That sounds very exciting. Much
I'll take one more question and we can close it. Okay.
Yeah. In that clip we saw, in the face collage, or whatever you like to call it, at the end with all the faces, was that Jesus? And if
No,
so,
those are
why?
No, and here's why. Those were all homeless youth in the Seattle area. There was photographs taken of them, and those were just my extremely rushed drawings of them. So, yeah. I mean,
And what if God was one of us?